Shakespeare uses a few different styles of poetic writing in the writing of his plays, especially Romeo and Juliet. And I wanted to go over some of those poetic writing styles today. The first one is called blank verse, and blank verse is the writing style that he uses most often in his plays. So it's the language of the people, and it's the language that he uses and the style that he uses when he has important speech that's important to the play. So, in other words, creating the conflict, developing the characters, right, creating the setting. This is the speech that you're supposed to pay attention to. So, in order to pay attention to it, Shakespeare has created blank verse that has a specific meter or length of line, which means it has specific number of syllables, but it doesn't rhyme. So let's take a look at an example of what we call blank verse. So this is Act 1, Scene 1, Romeo and Juliet. And I'm going to go down here to where two of our big characters, Tybalt and Benvolio, are trying to break up a fight. And they use blank verse. We see 10 syllable lines from both of these characters, but they don't rhyme. What art thou drawing among these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio, look upon thy death. So we've got these 10 syllable lines, and Benvolio comes back in and says the same thing 10 syllable lines, no rhyme. I do but keep the peace, put up thy sword, or manage it to part these men with me. So it's really close to those 10 syllables. This is an example of blank verse. It's really important because this is the setting up of the conflict of the entire play, the feud between the two families. So Shakespeare wants you to pay attention. So he gives it that specific syllables, specific meter, that the length of the lines, but it doesn't rhyme. So it's not that high emotion piece that we're going to see later. If we head back here, we can see that he also writes in something called iambic pentameter, or what we call rhyming verse. And this has a very specific meter, 10 syllables, and it also has a very specific rhyme scheme. And it's used to show high emotions or figurative language. So if we come back to our play and we kind of scroll a little bit more where we see Romeo for the first time, I'm going to kind of go down here. Romeo, here we go. Romeo is talking about how he is lovesick over this woman who does not love him back. And this is a high emotion. He is just grieving. He is depressed. He's sad. Lots and lots of emotion here. So we see iambic pentameter, right? Griefs of mine own lie heavy in my breast, which thou wilt propagate to have it pressed with more of thine. This love that thou hast shown doth add more grief to too much of mine own. So we see breast and pressed, shown and own, sighs and eyes. These lines rhyme. Same 10 syllable lines, but the rhyming tells us that this is high emotion, really, really important information that we need to pay attention to in the play. But there's also characters that speak in prose. Prose are sentences and paragraphs, just like you and I talk, well, maybe close to what we talk every day, but it has no meter, no specific number of syllables in the lines, and no rhyme. And it's used for everyday conversations, simple topics. And we see this often from simple characters, usually not our main characters. So if we head back here, I'm actually going to go to a different act and find our nurse. So I'm going to head to Romeo and Juliet here, and I'm going to go to Act 3, Scene 1. We meet the nurse here, and I'm going to find some of her language here, and you can kind of see a little bit further. See if I can find the nurse. And she just kind of talks. Not only does the nurse talk in circles, but she talks in just sentences. You can see the periods here. Yes, madam, yet I cannot choose but laugh to think it should leave crying and say I, and yet I warrant it had upon its brow a bump as big as a young cockerel's stone. So you can see there's no specific meter here, no specific rhyme. Peace I have done. God mark thee to his grace. Thou was the prettiest babe that e'er I nursed. And I might live to see thee married once if I have my wish. So no rhyme, no meter, no specific structure, just regular paragraph sentences. And when we see this, this is usually either common information or not very important information from a character. It's often used too with lower socioeconomic or social class characters, and sometimes even for comedic effect.